At dinner, my brother smirked. "You're just a girl. You don't even have a real career."
I stayed silent because he didn't know. I was about to buy his entire company.
Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house in Chicago always looked warm from the outside, golden lights, polished silverware, laughter echoing down the hallway. But if you stayed long enough, you could feel it, the quiet measuring, the subtle comparisons no one ever said out loud. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 29, average height, with dark brown hair I usually tie back when I'm working. People say I have a calm face, the kind that doesn't reveal much. I learned that early, growing up in a family where speaking less often meant being judged less. My work? Complicated, strategic, invisible to most people, and I've gotten used to that. "Emily, can you grab the plates?" my mom called. My mother, Linda Carter, is in her mid-50s, warm but practical, always moving, always hosting. She believes peace in the family matters more than being right, which is why she avoids conflict even when she sees it. I nodded and moved into the kitchen, rolling up my sleeves. Helping out gave me something to do, something safe. From the dining room, I could already hear it, like, "Jason just closed another big deal, right?" My aunt's voice rang out. That was Aunt Karen's sharp voice, sharp eyes, always curious but rarely patient enough to listen long. I stayed quiet, focusing on arranging plates. "So Emily," she added, leaning into the kitchen doorway, "what is it you do again?" I gave my usual answer. "I work in logistics, strategy, and partnerships." She paused, blinked, then nodded politely. "Oh, that's nice." And just like that, she lost interest. From the other room, Jason's name came up, again louder this time. More impressed. He wasn't even here yet. I placed the last plate down and wiped my hands slowly. Same house, same dinner, same invisible scoreboard. The front door opened, with a burst of cold air and louder laughter than necessary. Jason Miller had arrived. He stepped in like he owned the room. Tall, about 6 feet, lean but sharp-looking, with styled blonde hair and a fitted navy coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. At 32, Jason carried himself with the confidence of someone who had been praised a little too often, a little too early. Growing up, he'd always been the prodigy, first to code, first to build something that made money, first to be called impressive. "Sorry, I'm late," he said, not sounding sorry at all. Aunt Karen lit up immediately. "Jason, we were just talking about you." Of course they were. He shook hands, gave quick hugs, then slipped into his seat, like the evening had been waiting for him to begin. Within minutes, he was already talking. "We're gearing up for Series B," he said casually, leaning back. "Investors are circling. It's just about timing now." There it was, Series B. Half the table didn't understand it, but the tone alone was enough. Heads nodded, eyes widened. "Wow, that sounds huge," someone said. Jason smiled, just enough. I stayed quiet, watching, my hands wrapped around a glass I hadn't touched. My phone buzzed softly in my lap. Sarah Collins, 27, one of the sharpest analysts on my team, short black hair, always tired eyes, but brilliant under pressure. She'd been struggling for weeks under a toxic manager who took credit for her work. He just yelled at me again. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." I exhaled slowly, typing back under the table. "Hang on, we'll figure something out." Across from me, Jason kept talking. Words like valuation, growth check also, and scale floating effortlessly through the room, and just like that, the spotlight was his again. Jason's voice carried easily across the table, smooth and confident, like he had rehearsed this version of himself for years. The conversation had drifted from funding rounds to industry pressure, and then inevitably to who could survive it. He leaned back slightly, one arm resting on the chair, eyes scanning the table before landing somewhere near me. "Not everyone is built for real innovation," he said, almost casually. "Not loud, not aggressive, just enough to land exactly where it needed to." A few people chuckled, not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to let the comment settle into the room without resistance. No one challenged him. No one questioned it. That was the pattern. I kept my expression neutral, fingers lightly tracing the edge of my glass. This wasn't new. Jason had always spoken like this, subtle, polished, but cutting if you knew how to hear it. It wasn't just confidence, it was years of being reinforced, of never being corrected. Across the table sat Uncle Robert, a broad-shouldered man in his early 60s, with a permanent frown line etched between his brows. He nodded slowly, as if Jason had said something profound. "Tech's not for everyone," he added, reinforcing it without even looking at me. I felt the familiar weight press in, not anger, not even embarrassment, just recognition. A memory surfaced without invitation. 3 years ago, a family barbecue. Jason explaining something about apps and scaling, me attempting to add a point only to be talked over, dismissed mid-sentence. I had learned quickly after that, silence was easier. My phone buzzed again. Sarah. Calling. I glanced down at the screen, her name glowing insistently. For a second, I considered stepping away, answering, doing something real instead of sitting here. But I didn't move. Not yet. And I let it ring. And at the table, the conversation moved on, like nothing had happened. I kept my gaze steady on the table, but my mind slipped somewhere else, somewhere quieter, colder, and far more real than this room. For the past 8 months, I had been leading a negotiation that most people here wouldn't even understand. Boardrooms instead of dining tables. Silence that meant strategy, not avoidance. My name is Emily Carter, 29, average height, dark brown hair, usually tied back, a face people often call calm, unreadable. They don't know that calm was built, not given. Built through pressure, through being underestimated, through learning that speaking less often meant seeing more. The deal I was working on wasn't small, it was a full acquisition. A company with hundreds of employees. A price tag that crossed into hundreds of millions. And I was the one responsible for holding it together when everything threatened to fall apart. There were nights I barely slept, conference calls, stretching past midnight, voices layered across time zones. One of them belonged to Daniel Reeves, a corporate lawyer in his early 40s, sharp jaw, always in a perfectly pressed suit, the kind of man who spoke in precise sentences and expected the same discipline in return. He didn't tolerate uncertainty. Neither could I. We reviewed contracts line by line, clauses that could shift millions with a single word. Every decision carried weight. Every pause meant risk. At the same time, my phone had become a second battlefield. Sarah Collins, 27, short black hair, tired eyes but fiercely intelligent, had been messaging me almost daily. Her manager, Mark Benson, mid-30s, impatient, loud, the kind of leader who claimed credit and passed down blame, had been pushing her to the edge. Quietly, between negotiations, I helped her prepare, rewriting her resume, connecting her to recruiters, was building an exit plan she didn't yet believe she deserved. Back at the table, no one saw any of this. They saw silence. They assumed simplicity. But silence, I had learned, often carried the heaviest work. The conversation drifted again, lighter now, someone mentioning travel plans, someone else laughing too loudly at a story that wasn't that funny. I sat still, composed, letting the noise pass over me. Then my aunt spoke. "Wait," Aunt Linda said, tilting her head slightly, her voice calm but carrying just enough curiosity to cut through the room. Linda Carter, my mother's older sister, early 60s, silver-streaked hair always neatly pinned back, observant in a way most people underestimated. She wasn't loud like Karen, but she noticed everything. She looked directly at me. "Isn't your company acquiring Jason's company?" For a second, no one moved. It wasn't dramatic, it was quieter than that. Forks paused midair. Conversations stopped halfway through sentences. Even the background noise seemed to fade. Jason let out a small laugh. Oh, shaking his head. "That doesn't sound right," he said, the confidence still there, but thinner now. "You probably heard something else." His tone was casual, but his fingers tapped once against the table, just once. I felt every eye in the room shift, slowly toward me. I didn't rush, didn't explain, didn't soften it. "It closed last week," I said. That was it. No build-up, no extra words. Aunt Karen blinked. Uncle Robert leaned forward slightly. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Jason's smile held for a fraction too long before fading at the edges. "Closed," he repeated like the word needed clarification, but I didn't add anything, because the truth didn't need decoration, and in that moment the room changed, not loudly, not visibly, but in a way that couldn't be undone. Jason didn't respond immediately this time. Instead, he reached for his phone, movement slower, more deliberate. The confidence was still there, but now it felt like something he was holding onto, not something natural. He unlocked the screen, his eyes scanning quickly, then again, more carefully. The room stayed quiet, as if everyone was waiting for him to confirm reality. Jason Miller, 32, always composed, always certain now, looked different. Not broken, not defeated, just recalculating. His jaw tightened slightly, the faintest shift, but enough to notice. That's not public yet, he said finally, his voice lower. It will be, I replied calmly. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. Aunt Karen leaned forward, her curiosity suddenly sharper. Wait, Emily, what do you mean exactly? I set my glass down gently. I led the negotiation team, I said. On our side, silence again, but heavier this time. Uncle Robert straightened in his chair, studying me like he was seeing me for the first time. Even my mother paused in the kitchen doorway, her expression unreadable. Across the table, Jason exhaled slowly, eyes still on his phone. No jokes now, no smirk, just processing. My phone vibrated softly. Sarah, I glanced down. I finally quit. For a brief second, something warm cut through everything else, a small victory but real, earned. I'm proud of you, I typed back. When I looked up, the room had changed. Not dramatically, but enough. The questions in their eyes were different now. Not dismissive, not polite, curious, careful, and for the first time all night, no one interrupted me. The tension didn't disappear. It softened. Conversations slowly returned. But the tone had shifted, like everyone was choosing their words more carefully now. Laughter came back, quieter, less performative, and Jason wasn't leading the room anymore. He sat back in his chair, shoulders slightly lowered, listening more than speaking. When he did talk, his voice had changed, less polished, more grounded. The sharp edge was gone, replaced by something almost unfamiliar. I noticed it when he finally stood up and walked toward the kitchen, where I was rinsing glasses. Hey, he said, stopping a few steps away. Up close, he looked different, still put together, still confident, but there was a hesitation now, not weakness, awareness. I didn't know, he admitted, about the deal, about your role in it. I dried my hands slowly. I'm meeting his eyes. That's kind of the point, I said. He nodded once, absorbing it. Jason Miller had always been the kind of man who filled space effortlessly. But now, at 32, for the first time, he looked like someone learning how to share it. And if everything goes through integration, he added carefully, would there be opportunities to move over into your side of the company? It wasn't a demand, it wasn't arrogance, it was a question. I can't promise anything, I replied, but I can make sure you're seen for what you actually bring. He let out a quiet breath. That's fair. Back at the table, Aunt Karen was asking me questions, now real ones, about strategy, about partnerships. Uncle Robert listened without interrupting. I answered simply, calmly, and somewhere in the middle of it, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Dinner ended the way it always did. Plates stacked, chairs pushed back, voices fading into smaller conversations, but something underneath had changed. I carried a tray into the kitchen, the Pravichna rhythm grounding me when I felt a presence behind me. Emily. I turned. My grandmother stood there, Eleanor Carter, 82, small in stature, but steady, her silver hair softly curled, her eyes sharp in a way that missed nothing. She had always been quiet, but never unaware. I always knew, she said simply. I tilted my head. Knew what? That you were doing something important, she replied, her voice calm, certain. You just never needed anyone to see it. For a moment, I didn't answer, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. Later, as I stepped outside for air, my phone buzzed. Jason. Hey, I owe you an apology. I didn't see you clearly before. Thanks for being fair. I think I needed that. I read it twice, then typed back, we all grow. That's what matters. Another message followed. Sarah. I got an interview already. Also, what if we built something of our own? I smiled, leaning against the railing, the cold night air, sharp but refreshing. Let's talk tomorrow, I replied. At 29, I had spent years being underestimated, measured by standards that were never meant for me. But standing there, phone in hand, I realized something that felt quieter than victory, and far more lasting. Success didn't need to be announced, it didn't need to be defended, and for the first time, it felt entirely mine. Was I strong for staying silent, or weak for letting it go that far? Should I have exposed him at the table or kept my success private? Did Jason deserve that moment? Or was it humiliation? Be honest. If roles were reversed, would you still support me?